Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canada Immigration Live Q&A. I gave a quick little start here, but Alicia is going to be joining me, so let's put her in. All right, let's get Alicia in here. And there she is. Hi, Alicia. How are you?
Good. Just having some tech issues. Thanks, Mark.
No problem. We're connected. The audio is good. I can hear you fine. We can see you great. So we are ready for another weekly live Q&A in this crazy world of Canadian immigration. So what's new in Calgary today?
Oh, it's just it's like a polar vortex that has descended upon Alberta, as you know. So that's basically it. It's just slidey roads and lots of cold, and yeah, we're waiting to see what happens. Of course, there's lots of immigration and cross-border issues in the news. So I know I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of immigration questions from Americans recently who are looking at moving either temporarily or maybe permanently to Canada.
Yeah, I have the same thing myself. It's quite interesting. Both countries seem like they're just heck bent on getting as many people out of the country as possible. And it's been really tough, I'll be honest, practicing as an immigration lawyer. It's always been the case that when things become really complex or difficult or challenging and people don't know where to turn, they usually then turn to immigration lawyers. And the difficulty that we've had, you guys, over the last while is that it is often really challenging to be able to provide solutions that allow individuals to be able to stay. And there are certain steps that our government has taken to make it really tough for a certain segment of the foreign national population to be able to remain temporarily in Canada. And so when we're advising, it's really easy, I think, sometimes for people to say, well, you could file a refugee application or a humanitarian compassion application or a temporary resident permit or all of these, what we call Hail Mary applications. But I had a consult just yesterday, Alicia, with someone who was advised to come from Nigeria on a visitor visa. He arrived, he's got a family, wife, kids, and someone advised him to claim refugee status and claim that he was bisexual. Now, I'm not going to question whether or not that's the case, but the reality is his refugee claim recently got refused because, of course, there was no evidence to support his claim. And the individuals in Nigeria that were going to be there, to respond at the hearing and confirm the persecution that he allegedly had suffered, didn't answer the phone when he tried to call them during the hearing, and he tried to do it on his own. And so what do you say to someone like that? The reality is you got crappy advice from the person who told him to do that in the first place, because he was fairly educated. And Alicia, even if he came on a visitor status, he could have laid the groundwork for maybe potential opportunities for work or otherwise later. And but there's just so much bad advice that's going on. And just to remind all of you, that's why we created, Alicia and I and Igor, the Time's Up series, so that you can have a place to go to get information that you can actually rely on and trust. And I'll just slide over here to our web and I'll adjust the screen here a little bit and I'll get Alicia in on this. We're kind of running a little rough and tumble here today, but we'll get ourselves sorted up on the fly. There we go. We got Alicia in here. So I just want to remind people, we have lots of resources to help you guys. And one of them is our blog. So if you go to our blog here, you will see that often the main videos that we do here on the Canadian Immigration Institute, at least the substantive ones where we're really teaching you things about immigration, have their source in a blog post that we would have written previously. And so if you go through here, you'll see that some of the blog posts have a tag called Time's Up series. And these relate specifically to individuals that are running out of time in Canada. So I strongly encourage you, if you have not had a chance, to go back and review them. And sometimes there's a little bit more technical information contained in the blog post, like the source on the government website for the information we're sharing. It's not just Alicia and I sharing our opinion with you guys, but it's actually founded in law. And so we encourage you to go check out these various blog posts. And you can see for quite a while, anything that has Time's Up, this is a real critical one right here that I really wish this fellow would have read. So when not to claim refugee status in Canada. We also cover H&C applications. And it is a lifeline when you have no options, but only if you have a circumstance or things going on in your life that are actually of a significant seriousness, I guess, to stir in the hearts of an average Canadian. I can't remember the exact terminology, like compassion to relieve you from the suffering that you're in. And it's a very, very fact-driven process. And so we go into detail within this blog post on, when you may have a possibility of filing a successful H&C application and when not. And the reality that just because you file an H&C doesn't prevent you, from being removed if the government feels, if enforcement feels like they want to remove you from Canada. It doesn't allow you to, just the fact of filing an H&C, to gain status or maintain status. So all of these things we talk about. We talked about here in this one, my work permit in Canada expires soon. Can I change my status to a visitor? This is a really important one. The other ones we have, how long can I stay after my work permit expires? And I would say really, what to do when your Canadian work permit is expiring. These ones, especially this one on October the 10th of last year, is probably the one. Alicia wrote this one, and it is just full of just amazing information. And it really sets the stage, even back then, for what we're seeing today, so that you can get information that you can actually rely upon to make good decisions for you and your family in this world where many people just simply, Alicia, don't have a lot of options and they don't know where to turn. And where there's desperation, boy, people are sometimes just ripe for being exploited.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm seeing too, Mark, is not even just the individuals, but companies right now are trying to figure out what to do because, we know there's a lot of uncertainty with looming tariffs. And so a lot of companies in the US have branch offices in Canada, and Canadian companies have offices in the US. And so I'm getting a lot of questions right now from corporate clients as well about, moving staff and what's going to happen with the possible, are there going to be changes to the free trade agreement? Or is the current free trade agreement even respected anymore? So that's something that has a lot of people worried as well.
Yeah. I'll pull up I'm just giving a few shout outs. Great to have Spider-Man back here watching. This Juan V, we'll give him a shout out here. So he says, "Hey, Mark and Alicia, wonderful experience in our consultation with Alicia. You both are amazing. Also, Igor. Thanks so much, Juan. We really, really appreciate that. It's hard. Like, we really do try. You guys, Alicia, we've got lots going on in our lives, and like personal and professional, and compounded with all of this trying to help. It's something that we take very, very seriously. We know that your lives are being affected, not just temporarily, but permanently by some of the decisions that have been made. And one of the things that we do in our consultations is we make sure, and actually, Alicia, there was someone that said, "Oh, you're just taking people's money because there's no options." Well, that's not the case. The reality is, one of the things we pride ourselves in is giving you information that you can actually rely on to make decisions. We remove the uncertainty, and I mean both ways. If there is an opportunity to pursue a different pathway that you hadn't considered before, practical advice on how to navigate the time that you have left on your temporary status, we spend a lot of time diving into that. But we also give you practical advice that is, look, there are no feasible options here. You do not want to stay illegally, and you need to go home. And I had to have that discussion with an employer, Alicia, and their employee. We're coming into tax time. Many of you are bookkeepers. Lots of you are out there. And the reality is they were not able at this stage to get the LMIA application submitted. So the individual is running out of status. They got their work permit expired, so they're in a restoration period. And so we give practical advice. I said to the employer, look, can this person work virtually? Yes. Okay, then have them go back to India, apply for the labor market impact assessment, have them comply with all of the requirements because they're in a region where they're not barred, Alicia. So it's a smaller city that is not barred by the prohibition on LMIAs for low wage. And I said, have them go back, do an LMIA, and then let's apply for a work permit to bring them back. And this kind of practical advice, often people don't even consider it as being an option. And so then there's this temptation, well, let's keep trying, but in the interim, just keep working for me. which is awful. It is not the way to go. So this is the kind of thing that we offer in our consultations. And, you'll hear, let's see if we've got the audio going here, but you will hear a little bell, a triangle like this. So some of you may ask questions that are very specific, and they're not just information we're providing, but it would be legal advice. So remember, just click on the link below and you can book a consult with myself, Alicia, Igor. One client, Alicia, who booked a consult, I said, well, oh, you found us on Google. Well, that's great. We're actually trying to fix our website. It's a piece of junk. We've kind of had some problems when we switched to a new template. Now our SEO is all in the pits, but somehow you guys are still finding us, which is a miracle. Anyways, the person said they searched Google and they found us. And I said, well, why did you choose us? And they said, well, I could get in a consultation with you guys tomorrow, the next day, versus the other ones where it was weeks. And so we definitely try to make ourselves available more so than ever before because of what's going on. Time is running out, so yeah, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do it. You can watch the Time's Up podcast episodes here on the Canadian Immigration Institute YouTube channel, on LinkedIn, on X, Facebook, wherever you watch the live streams are broadcast. And it's a podcast, so you can subscribe on iTunes and read the blog. So there's a lot of different ways that you can consume the information, and we really try to be timely. Now, I want to show you something, Alicia, that I just saw, and maybe you saw this already, but I was just looking at this that just popped up just this morning, and they describe it as new rules to strengthen temporary resident document cancellations and border security and integrity, which it's very short, so we can just read it together. This is just one more step that the government is taking to do everything in their power to have people leave Canada or to make it very easy to remove them or not allow them in. And so just today, February the 12th, you can see here, updated their immigration and refugee protection regulations to strengthen authorities to cancel temporary resident documents. And so these changes give Immigration and Border Services officials explicit authority to cancel ETAs, TRVs on a case-by-case basis. And then these are some of the examples that they give. So when a change in a person's status or circumstances make them inadmissible or no longer eligible to hold the document. And, they've taken a lot of steps recently, Alicia, to really kind of remove the whole flagpoling ability of people.
Yeah.
And I see this as a very natural continuance of those restrictive powers, that when a person goes down and doesn't realize and then tries to flagpole and they can't flagpole, well, if an officer feels like you no longer should have your temporary document, they now have, and once again, explicit authority, so no question, no uncertainty, to cancel them. What's your thoughts on this, Alicia?
Yeah, and so this is something that they had made these regulatory changes. They'd published them in the Gazette. We knew that they were coming. They just hadn't come into force yet. And so they literally just came into force at the end of January, so January 31st, 2025. And then they're now putting this public statement out for anybody who may have missed it when the legislation was changing, because let's face it, most people are not watching the Canada Gazette for legislation changes unless you happen to be an immigration lawyer. So what was happening was that some people could have been falling through the cracks. And so the government wanted to tighten the ship and make sure that there's no possibility that if a document, for example, was issued on an administrative error, that it would still survive. There needed to be a legislative change so that they could just across the board cancel it if they found that there was an administrative error. And this has really big ramifications. So you'll see in this notice that it's broken down into two sections. The first bullet points are talking about only electronic travel authorizations. So if you're from a non-visa required country, or a TRV. But then the second section is not only talking about TRVs and ETAs, it also applies to work permits and study permits. So keep in mind that if you have transitioned to permanent residency, you can't keep using your temporary status document. You have to sit tight. You can't just do these soft landings where you go and then you try to come back on your temporary documents. As soon as you become a permanent resident, so that e-COPR, or if you're outside of Canada, the other type of COPR is signed, now all these temporary documents are automatically canceled. And then if somebody dies, they're canceled. And then, well, like I said, the administrative error piece. And so if somehow IRCC made a mistake in your favor and granted you a study permit or work permit when they shouldn't have, they now can cancel those.
Yeah. And I wonder, Alicia, like I'll give you a practical example of this. So in the past, someone from the UK, well, I'm not exactly sure, how it would flow now, but in the past, there wasn't the need for an employer portal. And so an individual could just show up at the port of entry. And if counsel or whoever was making the request wasn't watching and they applied for a old NAFTA professional work permit, well, that person would, sometimes officers wouldn't catch it, even though they were a UK citizen, and they would issue them a professional work permit. I know because I had to deal with renewals. And that when a person was issued the work permit and they weren't eligible for it, I can't see any world where an officer couldn't look at that and say, well, that was a mistake. We shouldn't have done that. That was call it an administrative error. And so we are therefore removing your work permit. And you think even more so with these complex rules for international students now, how easy it would be for an officer to go back and say, well, you know what you presented in your study permit, I'm not convinced anymore. And the thing that really perked my attention that I wanted to bring up to everyone is one of the case by case bases is if an officer is not satisfied that someone will leave Canada by the end of their authorized period of stay. And this often kind of washes away, or it did before, when an actual visa was adjudicated through a visa office abroad and or a study permit or a work permit. They've always, yes, had the ability to say, well, things have changed, but this just reemphasizes to everyone how important it is, even if you adjudicate your work permit or your study permit at a online and you have the port of entry introduction letter, that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed. And so it's always a good idea to make sure you have everything with you, even at that stage, to continue to confirm that you're going to abide by the temporary conditions of your stay. So we bring this up because it's a real it's a kind of a operational shift towards more enforcement that has been codified and instructed to the officers to adhere to. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when people are worried, and I think they're also going to assuaging the fears of Canadians who are trying to figure out, well, will people leave, right? And so this is one of the regulatory measures that they actually took well in advance. Like this was in process back in 2024, and of course it was worked its way through legislation and then was passed and is now getting implemented. And so this is another lever that they have to pull if and when people are not leaving Canada at the end of their authorized stay.
All right. And we'll just pull this one up here. Adesana says, most people came, visitor visa, claimed as refugees. Will they succeed? See, this is something that the in-Canada process for filing or claiming refugee status is there for a reason. It is for people who genuinely are within that category to be considered a refugee. And just, I won't get into all the ins and outs, but you can go check out the blog post that we did on when to claim refugee status and when not to, as well as our video. You can go back and watch it. But there's so many people that have made so much money counseling people to do these types of things. It just makes me so sad.
Well,
So
and I think,
sad.
Mark, it is important to kind of put some parameters around this too, because it's, when we look at immigration overall, we have millions of people who are coming in on temporary status, and it's not most of them that are claiming refugee status. Like, to be clear, it is only a very small fraction of the number of people who are coming in on a yearly basis that are actually making refugee claims. And there are different types of refugee claims too. And I don't know if a lot of people know that, like, Canada has commitments for government assisted refugees where they've been found by the UNHCR from outside of Canada already to be refugees, and Canada and other countries will take them in, only a small number of them every year. And then, yes, you're right, there are people who you can't claim refugee status if you're in your home country. So it's only if they manage to get inside of Canada and somehow, most of them require a visa, that they're already here, and then they turn around and make a refugee claim. And of course, as soon as they do that, like we talked about in the Time's Up series, it cancels their temporary stay because now they have a permanent intent. CBSA will take their passport because they have to wait for the end of the adjudication of the refugee proceedings. It really, really closes a lot of options off for people if they do make a refugee claim and they have not thought through what the ramifications are.
Yeah. All right. This is something that I know is a real issue that we've seen for a number of people, and it's delayed e-copers. And Omar, I know seems like you come on every week and you say, "What's the status? Has anything changed? What's going on?" And I don't have an answer for you, Omar, other than I don't know, Alicia. Like, what do you say? No amount of crystal balling this is going to figure it out. But what's your thoughts? Crystal
Well,
ball.
I mean,
Ball.
oops, there we go,
I know,
the
trying to
other
figure it
way,
out. Here, I'll get it under your
backwards.
hand. There we go.
There we go. So the problem with the good news is that, Omar, you're approved, right? So you're in a
Yeah,
much better situation than most people who are waiting, because it sounds like your PR actually was approved on paper. And now it's a matter of waiting for that, final signing off. So we have heard, of course, that there are going to be mass layoffs with IRCC. So that's something that for sure is going to be slowing down processing times. And in the past, when we've seen increased processing times, they try to prioritize the applications that are ones where families are separated, or they want to make sure that they hit those service deadlines for finalizing PR through express entry. And then when that very last piece has to come on the portal and making sure that e-coper is issued, that's where we've seen those processing times stretch, because the argument from IRCC is that, well, people are here, they're okay, they have their status, and we're not going to necessarily spend all of our workforce hours on something where it's not a huge fire. But I understand, Omar, that sometimes your PR document or your TR documents are expiring, your work permit's expiring, and it's really important that you actually get that e-coper because you need it. So we have seen that these processing times are getting longer, and we hope that they will, still be within a month and not longer than that.
right. Okay, let's jump to a question right here in our home jurisdiction. Alicia says, "Hi, Mark and Alicia. For Alberta Rural Renewal Stream work experience, can it be waived for a 3-year post-grad work permit holder graduated in Canada for a 2-year course, but not in Alberta? The policy is a bit confusing." So I've already got it pulled up here, Alicia. So this is the key part right here. So just roughly, qualifying work experience, you can see, must have a minimum of 12 months full-time in an eligible occupation within the last 18. That's the general rule. Now, that last 18 months work experience can be a combination gained in Alberta, or the 12 months can be a combination of experience gained in Alberta and in Canada and outside Alberta or abroad. So what you have to remember is that this program is available for people who are not even in Canada. But if we go down to the information on the post-grad work permit holders, this is for people who have completed a 2-year post-secondary education program at an IRCC designated learning institution. And here's the key: in their designated community only. So if you were to study at SAIT in Calgary, okay, and you have a rural renewal stream in Lloydminster, Alberta, it wouldn't work. So the 12 months of work experience is not going to be waived. If, however, you went to is it Grand Prairie College still? I don't know if it still is, or Lethbridge Polytechnic, like they call themselves now. Both of those communities have rural renewal streams. And in that case, if you went to those and took a 2-year post-secondary education program at Lethbridge Polytechnic and you were applying through the Lethbridge rural renewal stream, then the 12 months of experience can be waived. So in your situation, the answer is no. it actually is not only having studied in Alberta, but studied at an institution in the actual community that is the one sponsoring you, that designated community. All right. But yes, you bet there is confusion. We'll give a shout out to Natalie here. Hello from Florida, tuning in on LinkedIn. Great to have you here. I wonder, GMS. I wonder if Natalie, what does GMS stand for? I'm a part of the global migration section, which is of the American Immigration Law Association, but I don't think that's what GMS is. But anyways, hello, Natalie. Great to have you connecting in. I always like to give people shout outs who are watching on other channels. So great to have you connecting in. Okay. Okay. Hosh says, do you know when can we expect a French draw? We can't go, Alicia, without talking about the rounds of invitations. So we know that over a week ago, right now, and maybe today's the day, we'll have to see, there was a CEC draw, 4,000, and the low was 521. So if we go to the previous rounds of invitation, we can see that it's been a while since there's been a French. We haven't had one this year yet, which is quite unusual given the propensity that we had to have draws last year. So December 3rd was the last time we had a French draw. So let's go back here and let's pull it up, Alicia. So I know, trying to figure out, it's reversed, right? There we go. Okay, so what do you think? Do you think there's going to be a draw today or relatively soon to today?
Well, and it was funny because the draw was last week, but it was right after we finished our live, or a couple hours after we finished our live. And the good news is that 521, like I don't know if you can search by CEC, Mark, but like I think that's probably the lowest CEC draw that we've had for
Yeah, it's
some
been a
time.
while. This 521. Yeah. If
Yeah,
we go
because I
Canadian.
mean, yeah, those CEC scores have been like I think, so back in
509 in September.
Yeah,
And
so
it was another big
September.
one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then they did
So
those close together ones. Well, relatively close, I guess, but bigger ones. All these
summer.
CECs like crazy, right? Yeah.
And that's the only reason it dipped so low last summer was because they had done fairly high volume draws on a relatively regular basis, right? Once a month or even more frequently than once a month. So the 521 is encouraging for some people who were in the low 500s. I do think we probably will have another French, but I'm wondering if maybe we'll have a healthcare before we have a French because we also haven't had a healthcare for a little while. So
Yeah.
I guess.
I have a client who's anxiously waiting for healthcare. Maybe what we can do is we can pull up the minister here and I'm going to make a request of you, minister. You can see here that there's this big group of people between 501 and 600 here, 23,165. And because, as we've discussed, all the draws for CEC and the general have all been in this range, we haven't even got below 500. It would be very, very helpful if you gave us this kind of a breakdown right here by 10 CRS point increments. It'd be great for you to do that to give us 451. So this range, give us 501 to, what is it? 501 to 510, 511 to 520. That would be great to have that breakdown so that people can actually see how many are in this range, where if it continues on at this level below, 520, how many are actually pooling in, and creating this big glut at the 500s. It just helps people to make better plans and to have a greater idea as to the likelihood of actually receiving an ITA. So it's not hard. You guys have the data, minister. So that's my recommendation. Anybody in favor, give us a thumbs up. All right.
I vote yes. It was actually one of the things that I raised at the conference last year. So I did try to officially put that request in with the government contact there.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. We've got Anatoly here, and he says, "Hi, Alicia and Mark, tuning in from Toronto. A few of my friends who are also your clients, awesome, finally received e-copers last week." Oh, that's an applause. That's an applause. Actually, that was kind of a quiet applause. We need more fanfare for that. Anytime. There's so much negative. That's a little bit better. That's nice and loud. So a few of my friends who are also your clients finally received Newcomers last week. Very happy for them. Wish you a great live Q&A today. Thanks so much, Anatoly. We really, really appreciate that. Yeah, and I think people don't appreciate, even though we are located like physically, I'm in Lethbridge, Alberta. You and Igor are in Calgary, and Prem's in Karsten, and even though we're in Alberta, I would say the majority of our clients are actually in Ontario. At least that's what I find. So
Or
that's
BC.
the beauty of the nature of our firm. We, because of how we operate, it doesn't matter whether you live across the street here or whether you're on the other side of the planet. We are able to do what we do in the same seamless fashion. So
Unless
it's
you're in
great.
Quebec.
Yeah, except Quebec. That's right. Yeah, we definitely refer the Quebec-based immigration to our colleagues there. Okay, here's one, Alicia, that is a great one to point back people to the podcast and to the Time's Up series. But Forum says, how long can we stay in Canada once a closed work permit expires? Have applied for an extension in August 2024 and still waiting for the decision. So let's assume that the application was applied, the extension, before the previous work permit expired. So,
Yeah.
Alicia, do you want to touch on that just briefly for people who may not be familiar with the concept of implied or, excuse me, maintained status?
Yeah, and so I specifically wrote a blog article all about all about how long can I stay in Canada after my work permit expires. So I think that's almost exactly the title of the blog article. But Mark is right. The first thing you want to determine is what was the date of expiry on your initial work permit. Because as long as you submitted your application for a change of conditions before your initial work permit expired, then you should have implied or maintained status to continue to work under the same conditions. Now, you said it was a closed work permit, so you'd need to be working still for the same employer under the same conditions, in the same location, in the same knock that's on that original work permit. It really depends on what your work permit extension application said and what your supporting evidence was. Were you applying for another closed work permit? Did your employer do an LMIA? Was it Mobilité Francophone? Was it a different type of closed work permit? And did you provide all the supporting evidence? But hopefully, if you did what you were required to do, like sometimes if you're changing employers to a different closed work permit, you need to do a specific web form asking IRCC for permission to change employers before you're allowed to change employers. So please book a consult. There are a few moving parts in here, but hopefully if you go take a look at the blog that I wrote, that will give you some basic information that you can cross-check right away.
All right. Okay. I'll pull up Common Sense Canadian. Hi, Mark. Have you noticed most students out of status simply choosing to go underground when they become illegal out of status? So that's something I can't answer. And I would like to think that the answer is no. Remember, most students, at least who are here, do have the ability to apply for postgrad work permits. There's rules that have been changing and evolving over the last little bit, but most of the international students, that are currently here do have the ability to continue forward and apply for their postgrad work permits. But I don't know. Like, I open it up to you guys out there. Do you, like, anecdotally, what do you see around you on the ground? People who their work permits are expiring, their postgrads, what are they doing? Are they, abiding by the temporary the terms and conditions of their temporary stay? Are they returning home, or are they choosing to do what we've told them not to do? Once again, in our Time's Up series, and that's the dangers of choosing to stay without authorization. That's not something that we would ever encourage people to do. So,
And
what
and
are your
Mark, I
thoughts,
mean,
Alicia?
yeah, because anecdotally, like I can say, I have not had consults with people who had status expiring as a student, especially because they normally apply for their postgrad work permits. Um, but even people whose work permits are expiring and they know they've come to the end of the road, I can't think of anyone who said, "Oh, I'm just going to stay here and hope that I can sit tight." everybody has said, okay, well, what day do I have to leave? And what are the things that I need to do to prepare to leave? And how can I look at an economic option in the future? Like if I want to maximize my chances for express entry, or is there a way that I can leverage my Canadian work now that I have it in order to try to find another job and come back to Canada? So I think, most people are being proactive and they're
Mhm.
following the rules because they need to, and it's going to be the most advantageous pathway for them for future options.
Yeah. And that's the key, you guys. It's retaining the ability in the future when things settle down, when this craziness goes away, because it goes in cycles. Like Alicia and I have seen this. This is like round three, I guess. Round one was the beginning when we started practice. Round two was the global recession. Actually, right around that time, but the global recession kind of pushed from probably 2012 to 2014 or so. And then now this is round three in our short years of practice, which I guess 21 years is short years, right? We can say that. But those cycles really they circle, and a lot of it has to do with election time. A lot of it has to do with the global realities around us, the geopolitical situations, and there's a number of different factors. But I'm just going to flip back here, Alicia, and just remind people. So when you go to our website and you go to our blog and resources, you'll see we have our blog, podcast, our newsletter, and then YouTube channel, and of course our courses. But I want to just encourage you, go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and subscribe to Canadian Immigration Podcast. This one, we actually didn't do a blog post for it. I thought we did, but it's our Time's Up series and the high cost of staying in Canada illegally. So definitely check that one out, especially individuals. If you're in a situation where people are telling you, oh, just stay illegally, you can work, gain more money. And in the end, if you actually have to go, well, at least you've been able to earn more money. Well, that is the worst advice in the world, because any money you do own, able to earn is going to be substantially lower than, if you were in status. Like, people will take advantage of you. And you just don't want to do that. It closes off avenues to other countries. Okay, let's see next. Okay, so this one here, I'm just going to pull you up, Sarab, because this really is one of these ones right here. So we can't really give you advice on what to do in this type of a situation, but Sarab says, I'm on a closed loop work permit and it's valid up to April of this year, 2025. I lost the job. Do I need to apply for a visitor record? Another global talent stream LMIA under process. I'll get work permit soon. So the question is, once again, if it is, we ring the bell. Now, generally speaking, Alicia, when a person's work permit is a closed work permit, it only lists the employer that they're authorized to work for, no others. So what happens to that person generally when they lose their job? Are they out of status at that point? Of course not. But what are your comments for that?
Mm-hmm. So Surab, this is where it's important to keep in mind there's a difference between your ability to stay in Canada and your ability to work in Canada. And so as long as you have not left Canada, as long as you're still inside the country, and as long as your work permit is valid until April of 2025, you still have the ability to remain here. It's just that you cannot work for a different employer in general, unless and until you get that new LMIA-based work permit and you've submitted that closed work permit application and you actually get that work permit back. Or, like I said, there is a process to actually ask IRCC for interim authorization to work for the new employer. And so this is one of the things that I'd want to explore with you if you booked a consult, because you might be able to do that sooner rather than later and not lose as much income. So as long as you still have that valid work permit and you stay inside of Canada, you normally have the ability to remain here. Of course, you cannot work for a different employer. So you've got to support yourself without working and show that you can support yourself without working, because, theoretically, now that they have this new legislation, they could say, oh, well, how are you going to support yourself without working? And if you no longer have a temporary intent, we could cancel your TRV. And that would be an issue. But hopefully, you can stay, just make sure that you do not work unless and until you get either that new LMIA-based work permit or interim authorization permission from IRCC to work for the new employer,
Mhm.
generally. But that is not legal advice, it is just the general information.
Exactly. So we ring that bell and encourage you. The link to the book a consult is below in the description. Okay, this is one from X. Great to have someone tuning in here. We've got some LinkedIn, some X, some YouTube. We'll try to spread the love. Abarar says, can you please help how they can increase PNP non-express entry time to 21 months? Okay, so what he's referring to, and I'll just share my screen quickly here, is the processing times for economic immigration. So when we go to economic immigration here, we can choose which category. Abarar is what he's indicating is that he has applied for provincial nomination, and it is, and I think that's the category. Let's just go here. So PNP, we'll just pull it up here. There we go. So PNP non-express entry time to 21 months. So provincial nominees, and then you go, is this express entry? No. And then when you click on here, it says 21 months. All right. So you will also see, Abarar, that in Canada, spousal sponsorships have also jumped to about 21 months from their previous place of 12 months. And so what has happened here is that the government is strapped with resources. I don't know if they're now having to process a whole bunch more H&C applications or, or refugee applications or whatever it may be. They're having to shift people around. And so they say, okay, well, who of all of these different business lines and immigration streams can weather the storm better if processing times are longer? And one of the positions they take is, okay, if these individuals are going through the provincial nominee program, and, in many cases, they're here in Canada, not all the time, but in many cases they're here, they're on work permits, and life isn't really going to change much for them because they're expected to stay with this employer anyways, theoretically, although once again, there are programs that are non-employer specific, but they believe that because it's not going to be as big of a hardship for someone else, for instance, that maybe is not able to move forward with their life until a decision is made. I'll show you one example. If we go to, let me jump back here to family. And if we go to spouse living outside Canada right here, actually, let's go inside first. I'll show you. So inside Canada, of course, outside Quebec for us. Oh
Ooh.
my goodness.
It jumped
Oh,
from 21 to 28 months. Oof.
okay, well, that was a week ago. I didn't even see that it was now 28 months. Oh, I'm loath to tell my clients. Okay, so now, once again, we're getting into mid-pandemic processing now for inside Canada. And why? Because they believe you and your common law partner are living together in Canada. And so there's no hardship if you have to sit here twiddling your thumbs. That's the theory. The question, Alicia, is it now taking 6 or 7 months to get the acknowledgement of receipt to apply for the work permit? And if we
Which is
go
then
back
taking
here,
another 6 months.
yeah, which is now another, 150 some days. So spouse common law partner living outside Canada, outside Quebec, you can see they have kept this at 10. So they believe these spouses are probably separated. So it makes sense that they're going to try to process these faster so that spouses can be reunited. It's one of the 3 or whatever pillars of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act is the reunification of families. So this is a really, really tough situation. And so the volume of applications, I don't think, Alicia, has really started to substantially drop. And in fact, people are now applying through streams and categories that are not equipped with a lot of officers because they're not traditionally used to receiving so many applications. If we let's look at these. Let's look at H&C. We might as well look at the processing times. So processing times for H&Cs says 22 months. I think personally it's probably longer than that, but that's what they have for H&Cs. And then let's go here. And actually, I just want to look at the work permits. So if you're applying to extend from within Canada, 120 days. All right.
It's gone down 30.
So this is coming down while the other ones are going up. So the only thing that I can think of is the officers that were previously assigned to the economic or the family sponsorship are now being shifted to get the work permit processing under wraps. And why don't we do it, Alicia? We're already down here, so let's take a look at ESDC. I know you love this one, but let's just pull it up and see how long it's taking to get a labor market impact assessment.
This one
And
makes
have
me
they
crazy.
updated anything? No, not
Well,
really.
they did. It used to be 64 days and now they're saying 68 days, but they lie because
Yes.
literally I have had an application submitted with the employer in April of last year, April 9th. It is
Yeah.
now February
February 12th.
12th, and we still do not have a decision. And when the employer is calling them to follow up, they said they're only working on applications submitted in March of 2024.
Yeah.
So it is just ludicrous for them to put a processing time of 68
Yeah.
days on their website. Even if it's business days, we are like hundreds of days now. So
I don't have an image for the minister. So we'll pull up Minister Miller. Minister Miller, talk to your compatriot and tell him to get this sorted out with these goofy processing times that are meaningless.
at ESDC, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So thanks, Abrar. And sorry, my friend. That's pretty much it. Everybody's kind of in a pretty tough situation.
Yeah,
Okay.
Abrar, I would also say take a look because Mark
Mhm.
and I just did a podcast on bridging work permits, right? So take a look at that article because most of the time, if you have submitted your PR application and as long as you have your acknowledgement of receipt, you should hopefully be eligible for a bridging work permit if you are getting close to the expiry. And you'll want to make sure that you know the difference between a bridging open work permit and a bridging closed work permit. So make sure
Yeah.
to take a look at that.
Yeah. Check out this blog that Alicia did here. Very, very useful. And that's on holthelaw.com website. Okay. Let's see here. Who is next? Okay. We'll tackle this one for Andrew here, Alicia. This is probably another one that's as confusing as anything. So Andrew says, is it possible to enroll in a 6-month career course? Now, we don't really know what you mean 100% by that, Andrew, but a career course while doing a 2-year study program at study permit basically on a study permit in Canada. So I'm assuming the 2-year program is at a regular, school that you were admitted to. And then the 6-month career course, we don't really know what that is, but I don't know, Alicia, if we're actually in a position if we have enough information to answer this.
No, for sure we don't have enough information. So, Angie, this is one of the gray areas where it's important to know all the particular details of your situation. If you take a look at the IRCC page, Program Delivery Instructions on study permit conditions and on when a study permit is required, you'll see that study permits are only issued if it's a DLI, but the short-term course of studies exemption doesn't apply if you've already been here for a while. And so in some cases, people are like, oh, well, it's a short-term course of studies because they've heard about that. But if you take a look at the actual fine print of who can study without a study permit, and sorry, there's another one, Mark, that says who can
Oh,
study without a study permit.
gotcha.
Um, if you take a look at who can study without a study permit on the short-term exemptions, it is only within the initial 6 months of your entry that you might be eligible for that. So anything, if you've already been here and it's been more than 6 months, that short-term course of study exemption doesn't apply. The other thing is it depends really on whether, if it's a non-DLI, if there is any in-person part of your exam. So sometimes courses are 100% online except for the exam, and then you actually have to be invigilated in a testing center in person. And IRCC literally says, well, you need a study permit for the in-person testing part of that course. And so there's a lot of little fine details that are important because you don't want to be in a situation where you've studied without authorization because it can jeopardize your current study permit.
Is this it, Alicia? I'm just trying to find. This is kind of like a drop down here that if you answer the questions, it provides a little bit of a explanation. So in this case, if we play this out just for fun, I'm already in Canada and want to study. What kind of permit do you have right now? A study permit. You have 3 options: extend. Yeah, it doesn't give enough detail. So
Yeah. I'd have to try to figure out where they put that page.
that's okay.
Yeah.
So Angie will have to, yeah, there just isn't enough information there for us to be able to answer that one. Okay, Anand says, when they say they can cancel document when they become a permanent resident, what does that mean? Can our PR get revoked? Okay, we've already talked about that a little bit, Anand, but once again, this relates to this update that just happened just February 12th, just confirming what's already been published in the regulations. And now it's kind of official, that gives border officers the ability to explicitly cancel, explicit authority to cancel ETAs, and also to cancel work permits and study permits. So, and one of the reasons is if they become a permanent resident. And so, Alicia, do you want to hit on that just one quick as a little reminder?
Yeah, so they're only saying that permanent residents of Canada don't require an electronic travel authorization or a visa to come to Canada because they're already Canadian permanent residents. So what they're doing is they are canceling that ETA or the TRV as soon as somebody gets Canadian PR status. And I think part of the reason they're doing that is sometimes that PR card is taking a long time to come in the mail, and sometimes people are trying to do soft landings and come back and forth, and basically they're trying to shut that down. They're saying, if you have become a Canadian PR, you need to wait for your Canadian PR card, or you have to apply for a PR travel document. So that's really what they're saying here.
Yeah. And here's a tough one, Alicia. Applied for an extension to my spousal open work permit and was rejected. I applied again before January 20th, so under the old rules, and submitted an employer letter of my spouse who was under an postgrad work permit. Can I keep working after my work permit expired? So this is a pretty clear cut one, which is really, really sad. Um, I think, Alicia, if the work permit was rejected, I'm assuming that the refusal came back after your other work permit had expired. So if you're in a period where you now have to restore your status, you do not have the ability to keep working. And that's one of the heartbreaking decisions. And Igor and I actually did a detailed video on our YouTube channel. I guess it was a week ago or a little bit more than a week ago Friday, on some of the very, very harsh positions that IRCC is taking when it comes to spousal open work permits, and how they're going out of their way to try to refuse them. And I don't know how any other way to say it. But Igor and I did a video on that topic. And so I'm just trying to pull it up here. But yeah, I don't know if you have any
Yeah,
thoughts on that in the interim, Alicia.
and NOCR, what's really important is what was the date of your initial spousal open work permit? How long was it valid until? What date did the refusal come in? And what date did you, if you applied before January 20th, at the time that you applied for the second work permit application, was your first work permit still valid? That's really what we're trying to figure out. If that second work permit was submitted after the refusal and after your first work permit was expired, then you lost your status. You have to have done a restoration. So you had to have actually paid another 200 restoration fee in addition to everything, and hope that you complied with all the rules before January 21st. To make sure to even have a chance at getting that extension. So really, 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 we would recommend book a consult so we can look through the documents. What did you submit? When did all these things happen, so that we could give you some advice?
Yes. And I'll just shift over. This is the blog. This is the live stream that Igor and I did. Spousal open work permit refusals, and I was a little harsh just because I thought the officers really they did
They were
things
mean.
they didn't need to do. It was kind of a nasty practice, and I hope the minister and his staff actually listen to those situations, because they're not just for people we're dealing with, but we have had lots of reports of others kind of being stuck in that exact situation. All right. Okay, we've got a few more minutes. We're going to wrap this one up closer to our 1 hour time. Um, let's just see here. Omar, you're welcome. He says, thanks for addressing my question. Um,
And maybe just along those lines, Mark,
mm,
I saw a couple questions about people who submitted LMIA-based work permits. And this is kind of what we've been seeing with LMIA-based work permits too, that the employer submits the LMIA and ESDC doesn't make a decision. And their website says that, it's 70 days processing time, and it's not, it's 10 months processing time. And in the meanwhile, the person has submitted their work permit saying, IRCC, please wait for ESDC to make a decision on the LMIA. But IRCC is saying, we're only going to wait 90 days. And then we're going to make a decision on the work permit application. And then they refuse the worker's work permit application, and the LMIA still hasn't been issued. And so that's another thing that we've been seeing more and more of as well. And it really gets people in a sticky situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here is an interesting question. Now this is, let's just see here. Okay, so the question comes from, bear with me here, Grav. So lots of people, like I said, are trying to figure out ways in which to stay. And so the question essentially is, where do we find the list of employers with LMIAs? Because that's what people talk about. Well, the reality is the government does post that data on their open government site. And so when you go here, there is the ability to search up and see which employers have been issued. Now, the challenge is like the current, like if we go here, I'm trying to think, I don't even know what the most current data is, Alicia. Q3, I don't know if there's anything past, I guess maybe Q4. This data right here is Q3,
And I wonder too, maybe if Gaurav is asking,
July to
like, what
September.
are what are the LMIA exempt IMP categories? Because that we can show
Mm.
you. So if you're
It
asking,
says, yeah, it says LMIA and LMIA exempt employers. So, is it required to inquire through ATIA? Maybe ATIP?
yeah,
Sorry, my
yeah.
friend. We're trying here.
So the issue is that they don't always publish the list of employers who have valid LMIAs until it's been some time. Like they'll publish it from a few years ago, is what Mark is saying. And so there
Yeah.
isn't a current publicly accessible list for a lot of these things, especially for for the IMP when they have done an employer portal offer. I don't believe there's a list through the employer portal of employers who have submitted employer portal offers, but there is one for employers who have submitted and received positive LMIA decisions.
Gotcha. Okay. We'll finish off with just a couple more here. Elise says, "Hey, Mark and Alicia, do you still provide the course about spouse sponsorship on your website?" Thank you for bringing this up. Every meeting we get together, I say, I am working on this thing. And the irony is that I've never had so many spousal sponsorships that I'm doing right now, Alicia. And so I have been assisting people to the point now where it's really tough to carve out the time to just get the website, to get the course revamped. And the course was awesome. It really was. But what happened was they went away from paper-based to kind of a hybrid, and then they went all online, and then they changed the interface. So the videos that I'd created and put a whole bunch of work into just didn't align perfectly with what you see when you're applying. And so I'm having to recreate it. And oh man, it's just one of those things. So yes, Elise, and what she's referring to is the Canadian Immigration Institute here is our delivery arm essentially for our marketing and our public, kind of relations and outreach to the community with immigration information. And within here, we have courses that we have. Now, we're working on the citizenship application course. It should be ready pretty soon. But right now, we have the Express Entry Accelerator, which is the masterclass. Every 2 weeks it happens. We have that this evening at 4 p.m. Mountain Time. So there's still time for you to subscribe to this course and get in. Remember that once you subscribe once, you have access to the course material for life. And as soon as they say no more job offers, then Mark has to re-record the Express Entry videos, removing those extra 50 or 200 points for job offers and any other changes they make, such as the removal of some of the category-based, categories such as STEM, etc. So, and transport, I think, is also removed. So, and then the TRV course. If you're thinking about bringing anyone to Canada, we strongly encourage you to do that. There's still a current sale on at 66% off on that one. It's a brand new course that Igor created. So we encourage you to check those out. And so I probably could put the spousal sponsorship coming soon here, just like the Canadian citizenship application. And the reality is we are pretty darn busy with work, working with people and helping them try to make plans for the future, both individuals and companies. Okay, Alicia, let's hit this one quick. This is a quick little Express Entry one. Please, do you have an idea if work experience from a co-op program counts towards Express Entry?
Yes, we definitely have an idea, and it does not if you are still a full-time student. And so a co-op work term is normally co-op work permit required. And so depending on the course of studies, you would have had to have a letter from your school saying, yes, co-op is an integral part of this learning, and it is not going to constitute more than 50% of the studies. And then
Mhm.
you would have had to have had a co-op work permit. And when you work on that co-op work permit, yes, you get paid. But when you look at express entry, you are not eligible under the ministerial instructions under Section 15. You are not eligible to count Canadian high skilled work experience for express entry Canadian work experience points if you were a full-time student. So while you are completing your co-op internship, you are still usually a student and you haven't completed your program of studies. And so if that is the case, then it's not eligible for claiming express entry Canadian work experience points until you get a notice of completion from your school. And then as soon as you submit your postgrad work permit, assuming that you're eligible for a postgrad work permit, um, only once you have submitted a complete PGWP application, only those people could start working full time, and then you can start counting start the clock ticking in terms of your Canadian work experience, but it has to be high skilled.
Oh, this one breaks my heart, Alicia. Henry says, M&A greetings from Mauritius. I waited in the pool for 5 years since 2021 till the date with CRS 475 to now 464. I got a notification of interest, I think is what it is, last year, but was returned due to not signing Schedule B on the application, uh, the form, anyways. And oh my goodness, Alicia. Ugh. I see this all the time. It's always the little things that trip people up. And many times people just don't even realize that they're an issue. And so this stuff, Henry, that breaks my heart, to wait so long. And the reality is the world has changed, you guys. The reality is there is no longer often a second chance with any of this that we're doing. And so, we're here to help and support you guys. We're here to try to educate you, to teach you the courses. Like I said, the Express Entry Accelerator, it's the sponsor of these live streams. This is what we are, this is what allows us to do this. The course itself is, and the master classes are there to help people avoid the mistakes that we see all the time. And it's the same for all of the applications. And if you do need help, don't hesitate to reach out. We do consultations. When you go to our firm website, you have the ability to see everything that we do there. And one of the things I'm having now to reiterate to everyone, they say, well, will you be our immigration lawyers? Well, the way we work, we just don't take control over your application, but we support you fully in preparing and revising and correcting and making your application as solid as it can be, and even help you to file it, upload, submit the application. That's what we do. And it's not the same as other firms for a reason. We don't just take over your application and send you a goofy little questionnaire and say, okay, we'll fill this in and don't ask us questions. We'll just do it for you. We don't, because Alicia and I know that there's information that you have that's only going to come out when we talk, when we speak directly with you, to make sure that the information being presented is literally as perfect as we can make it. Now, obviously, there's no guarantees that this is stuff I'm always dancing around. I'll be honest. Ultimately, you don't hear Alicia and I telling you our acceptance rate or things like that. But what we do is, the guarantee we offer is that we care, that we truly will meet with you and pour our heart and souls into assisting you to make sure your application is done properly, that you're not missing things, that the questions, that you've answered them properly, that there's internal consistency, that your documents meet the requirements, whether it's a spousal sponsorship, express entry, a PNP application, work permit, whatever it might be. And when things go bad for you, if you filed your own application, we help to file reconsideration requests or responses to procedural fairness letters. We help you to draft those and put those together. We file judicial reviews. We file mandamus applications if applications are hung up. So in any way that you need support, we're there for you. But the only thing we don't do, as Alicia indicated before, is Quebec-based immigration. We refer that to our friends in Quebec, and we don't do refugee or asylum applications. But other than that, and we don't do a lot of caregiver as well, I guess, if we put that on the list. But for the most part, we're there where you need us, and we are there to help you and support you with as much or as little support as you need. And it's just us. It's Igor, Alicia, and me, and you, and your spouse, and your family. No one in between. No assistant, no paralegal, no consultant in between us. It's just us and you. And that's how we work our process. And you can learn more about it just by going to our approach on our firm website. So it's direct lawyer to client collaboration. So without, just to remove any question of doubt, do we help people with their applications? We are so much more than just a consult, although it always starts with the consult, because in many cases you have a few questions and we can respond to them. And then it also gives us a chance to see if you're a right fit for our firm as much as us for you. And then we go from there. So Alicia, do you have anything else to add before we wrap up?
I think that's the main thing. I saw a note from Simon and saying that, they submitted their PNP application, their PGWP is going to expire in September. How can they stay in Canada? Please, please, please go read my article on bridging work permits, because that might be the answer that you need. It depends on what kind of OINP nomination that you have. So I don't know if you just mean that you only have a notification of interest, or if you actually submitted you had a nomination and submitted a full PR application.
Yes. All right. We'll finish with this last comment from Friends Immigration. It says, hi, Mark and Alicia. This is RCI Manish from Friends Immigrations. I want to let everyone know you both are doing outstanding job for your viewers. No questions for me. Would be happy to see you smile. So there's a smile. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And we will be back next week. And stay tuned for new episodes on our Canadian Immigration podcast to drop, as well as videos as well.